Definitely. Garrick Latta from Portland High Standards was telling me that he is dealing with the hop latent viroid, and he thinks he has it eliminated from his facility
Hmm.
after a lot of hard work. And he said a lot of growers are battling that in Portland. So yeah,
Uh, everywhere.
so basically, tissue culture is a good way to get rid of the hop latent viroid. It doesn't transfer over.
Uh, it's the one of the best tools available.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. First of all, testing will always be necessary to know whether or not it's present. Okay. Because it's latent, so you don't necessarily see it.
Yeah.
And frankly, the truth is we've probably had this in the crops for 30 years or more.
Right.
There's no reason it wouldn't be. Um, it's mostly going to be moved on dirty tools, but also for the fact that moms are cloned over and over again. So if that plant happens to pick it up from a dirty tool and it spreads, you're now, of course, the grower is the one who's spreading it into the whole crop, and we can just do that backwards to fix it. Um, Tissue culture, it helps fix it in that, uh, first of all, viroids are not uniform in the plant. So even if you have a plant with viroids, every limb, every limb that's growing from a low growing point is the viroid is always chasing the limb.
Okay.
Same with any other pathogen. The way meristems work is they are the origin. New stuff is being made up there, and it's all growing backwards. So the viroid has to go cell to cell to cell to try and catch up with it. And incidences of the viroid being in the very base meristem tissue are really pretty rare.
Makes sense.
Which is why you see you hear of the process called meristemming, which is only done in tissue culture for the very same reason that we're going to keep taking successively smaller pieces and putting them into culture, uh, because we are outgrowing the viroid. And here's the story. So, viroid is every limb of the plant is outgrowing viroid. Viroids, like other pathogens, grow in fits and starts. So maybe it's 2 inches from the tip, maybe it's 2 millimeters from the tip, maybe it's 2/10 of a millimeter from the tip. You kind of have this tug go. It might be 4 or 5 inches from the tip. Um, so number one is when we take a piece off of the plant, um, the smaller the better. And of course, we're using clean technique. Bleach is the only thing that'll do it. Alcohol does not kill viroids. So we want, we want a good strength of bleach. I really end up, when I'm working in my garden, I'm carrying I've got a fanny pack with bleachy sponges in it. So I stick my hands in and an apron because you will get that stuff everywhere. But an apron, a fanny pack, bleachy sponges, and I'm always sticking my tools in there in my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then I touch the plant. So I just keep doing that over and over. That's the best first thing to have. Uh, and then, of course, you cut the piece. I'm going to trim it down to as little as possible. And it itself is going to get a surface cleaning with the bleach before going to culture. So we kind of look at it and say, okay, if we got to get a veg table of 100 plants. We're going to take 30 pieces off of it. Um, you know, maybe 15 or 10 of them might be viroid free, but done correctly, we haven't cross contaminated anything. Those go to tubes, those start to become bigger plants. Now that we have the habit of cleaning our tools, I'm less concerned about cross contaminating them again. So if you could see it, it's almost like looking, if the veg table could be a checkerboard of positives and negatives next to each other. It's latent, so we don't necessarily see it.
Right.
But we are, number one, always taking the best of the best. So if there is any effect, we're possibly eliminating it just on best of best selection. But lastly, number two is the only way to really know is by PCR testing. And I've had the tools to do all this stuff, but it's really a lengthy manual process because it's RNA. I mean, we call it a viroid like it's an organism, but it's not. It's just a 256 string of base pair string of RNA. I could make it in a PCR machine in less than 45 minutes. Just program it in and the machine will make it. Do, just like that. Not like I'd want to. I did that a long time ago in anticipation of where we are now. So, you know, That's it. That's it. Started way down the line. I had to make this viroid 30 years ago so that I would get this business today.
Genius.
Just kidding, of course. Yeah, I know, evil. No. My thing is, I want to solve problems for growers, and what we're left with really is that to do the selection to make sure you're viroid free. I even came up with a little protocol that I use with the tissue culture, and that is, well, for instance, take a 1 inch cut or inch and a quarter piece to put into culture. But before culturing it, I'll take the bottom ½ inch off of that and trim off some of the leaves, and that will be the sample I submit to the viroid testing company. So this is a little different than the protocols they give you, and this is another one of the ways I'm really trying to change the industry, because they'll tell you to use big old leaves and roots and so on because you're going to have a heavier viroid load. Great for them because it helps them, tell you the presence of viroid in the garden.
Sure.
But if they come back with a positive, you still don't have a solution. So growers have to consider, oh, am I going to throw away all the? I'm going to throw away that plant, and now you have to test all of them. What do you do now? And so you might be like, okay, I'm going to buy viroid certified free stock. I have to repopulate the garden. This is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for something that you've actually already been managing. Like I said, if you do have the viroid, you've already been profitable. We just want to make sure we want to eliminate it from the garden so it doesn't become a problem.
Right.
And so with the microclone kits and the tissuponics, I sort of create a little parallel path to regular cloning, try to make everything work off the veg plants, build it on turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing in that veg room is going to get older than 6 weeks, maybe 8 if we need an extra round of cuts or whatever. But it's always leaving. It always goes to flower. It's always replenished. Think skin. What keeps skin healthy? It's always being sloughed off and replaced. Bark. Same deal. That way, when you come back with a positive test or a negative test, we know that the cutting it came from, being from that very bottom piece of the cutting, everything above that is also viroid free.
Right.
Because the viroid can't go through that ½ inch to get to the top. So if it's negative, it's either the load is so small that it's unseen in a very sophisticated PCR machine I mentioned. Remember, this is the exact same machine they're going to use to come up with that whack DNA evidence that you get off of stupid things like cigarette butts. And so you ever watch any of those true crime shows, and they're just like, oh yeah, we got this DNA off of something that they just touched.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing that with viroids. And so I also would like to throw out a shout out to the company Toomey Labs in Colorado, because right now they are definitely doing the very best job for the money of anybody in viroid testing. And they are accepting material by the protocol I gave without a lot of fuss, which has been pretty nice.
Yeah. Is it expensive to test for hop latent viroid through them or anyone else?
It is when you start doing a lot of plants. It's usually $25 a plant with a like $1,000 minimum.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not bad, considering that also counts. That's the cost of the mail. They're going to send you tubes. They have to first clean the plant and refine just the RNA portion of the sample. So you send in a crude sample, you got to digest that and get those parts out. So that's going to be a little expensive column that's going to cost a few dollars itself. And then they'll take that mix and put it in the machine, and that's where the machine does its work, and it's fabulous. It will put in the little complementary pieces of DNA. They're going to turn the RNA into DNA. They're going to put in complementary pieces that'll find it, and then the PCR machine will make a bunch of it, and it will not only be able to tell you a yes or no on the presence, but it'll quantitatively be able to tell you how much was in the starting sample. So, it's sensitive down to just a few a few fragments of viroid, like that, for $25 a test. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I got users. Ultimately, what I got going, I recommend is that growers will start the tissuponics, start my tissue culture, because there's all the other advantages anyway. To get them off of mom plants, get the hang of it, And then as they feel fit, sending off pieces from either pieces that will go to tissue culture, or sometimes a little larger pieces that might be made as a regular 4, 5, or 6 inch tall clone. But the same idea, it's going to be that half inch of base stem, that quarter inch of base stem that's sent in for testing, plus, a couple of leaf tips that also come off of that piece.
Yeah. Now, I had a question.
But that way,
Oh, go ahead.
sure.
Oh, my question was on the cost, I guess, of doing tissue culture. Like I'm sure as you scale up, a commercial operation will have a lower, cost per clone. But what does it range? Just so people know.
Oh, oh, you got it. It's surprisingly really cheap. My out of the box cannabis kit is about $400. No, it's $300. And it'll do about 400 plants your first time through, but mostly with tools and vessels and things that you're going to use over and over. After that, the replacement media, which is really the only thing that you need to replace, comes out to about 10 cents a plant. It's like $9.50 a liter, which will do over 100 new plants. So at 10 cents each, the materials cost is not that much.
No.
And so the other thing I work at is trying to keep the space small, the labor small. I really have tried to make tissue culture so that it exists in the grow facility, but it's not a focus. You can walk past your lab space most of the week without having to look in or any special concern. Most of the time, the tissue culture is like something you do on Monday or Tuesday before lunch, and then you are pretty much free for the week.
Nice.
And again, there's that whole Columbia example. I bought the stuff in a store, and was using it 2 hours later. I bought a clear plastic box, and I bought the pressure cooker and everything else. The grower brought me a pH meter and everything else we did at a restaurant table.
Well, that's proof positive right there that you don't need a NASA facility per se, or a HEPA filter necessarily. That's really cool.
HEPA, yes.
Okay.
We were missing the HEPA at the restaurant. They were bringing it home to put in that, but we did use a clear plastic storage box as a still air hood. So if you can imagine the box turned on its side, you take the camera flashlight, you put it right on top of the box. So now we got a lighted surface. But inside is the tubes we just sterilized with that little gel hardened auger, scalpel forceps, our little plate, and a kind of a tall glass full of the plant pieces and the chlorine water. My hands were clean, but that was all I needed to put everything in the tubes. And then I just took everything out of the box, put the lid on it, and now you had a clean, secure storage to move them to the better location.
So I guess my next question is, were there any other patrons of the restaurant that were like watching you do this propagation and forgetting about their date that they're on?
We did it during before dinner hours.
Oh, okay.
Because it was actually my customer owned the restaurant.
Oh, right on.
But the staff, oh hell yeah. So the bartenders were out, the serving staff were hanging out, the owners came in and were watching, and even the people in the kitchen came out to see what was up, because they were like, "What the hell did you do?" We just sent a pot in for them to put on the stove, and then they bring it back out, and they sat and watched all of this. But absolutely, I had an audience of I think as many as 8 people at one time, all kind of looking over our shoulders as we're doing this work. But it was funny. I mean, I had first timers. Did I mention we only really had one English speaker, and I used my tourist Spanish and Google Translate, but in maybe 12 messages total over the entire process, did we not only get the point across, but they did it well, and they are still doing it now. And today I'm packing and sending them more materials, because the thing that happens is when they get the kit and get started, they order more tubes and media. And that's always the rule. And incidentally, this is scalable. So I've got growers who do 1,000 clones a day. And they do pretty much the exact same principle, but start looking for larger fixed culture rooms with HEPA built in, and a little more serious kitchen and sterilizer, such as a larger wall autoclave and industrial sink and dishwasher, because dishes do become an issue. We want to clean all that stuff out and turn it over.
Sure.
But interesting, and larger mixers and dispensers, obviously. But what's funny is, you know, I get to combine, my history and experience into everything that's in the kit today, and that's always what I've done. I cross industries, so you kind of asked me before about my history. We didn't even get into my stuff at the university, and where I discovered tissue culture or rediscovered it. The miracle job I had after that, and me actually, putting this out to the cannabis industry like 25 years ago when nobody knew about it, and just sort of keeping it on the side. If we still have time in this podcast, I've got a fabulous old tissue culture story, and somewhere or another we need to tell the old Kurt story.
Well,
but I don't want to. I don't want to sidetrack. I don't want. We'll do another podcast. Your listeners got to be getting tired now from their brain working so hard.
Well, I think
the comprehension
especially
on it.
people like myself that have been in the industry for any number of years, just kind of hearing these old school stories of how things were not easy. They weren't, laid out for you on a store shelf. What do they say? Necessity is the mother of all invention. So it's like,
oh, so much.
Yeah, this is really the goal of these podcasts, is really to kind of capture these anecdotes and stories, before they're lost, because really, I don't know. I love.
I'm not that old.
Well, I'm not getting any younger. I'm turning 42.
You don't look too bad,
I'm turning 42 myself this year, and God, I look back and think like, boy, I've been growing, cannabis for like, I don't know, 15 years or so now, and I think that's a long time. But then
it's respectable.
But then there's so many others who have so many more decades under their belt compared to me. So,
you did a good job. You did the task. You used the resources available. You pursued knowledge, right? Which is really how it goes.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, where did you shop in the Valley? Well, where did you buy your stuff?
So
no stress.
So
no stress on Santa Monica.
So the main store that I would go to, because it was so close we could skateboard to it, was Foothill Hydroponics.
You went to Foothill, Mosen. Mosen, I love Foothill.
And as far as I understand, he was the first hydro store in the country. And
he's the oldest in the country.
Yeah, and
because he stayed open.
Yeah. He was a character. He was an acquired taste. Some days he liked you, other days he didn't.
You were spending money, but we get to share with your listeners what was absolutely unique about Foothill. That is still absolutely unique about Foothill. The demo gardens out on the street. They would build stuff that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Foothill, Mosen was good, but Mosen was exceptionally good at attracting talented young people to work for him who were very innovative. Because we were making this stuff up at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, it was like a lot of people thought that hydroponics would feed the world. So all this effort was put into all the different kinds of gardens. How are you going to deliver the water? Aeroponic, deep water, NFT, flood, media-based, no media, whatever you got, fog aeroponics, spray aeroponics, you name it, like that, which is kind of like the history of general hydroponics. General hydroponics and even Botanicare did all their work trying to make the ultimate hydroponic garden. Yep. That you just drop plants into and everything happened. Ultimately, both of them made all their money on nutrients because of the fact that in hydroponics, just about everything works. And Foothill was the perfect example of that, because what did you see? You saw towers, you saw A-frames, you saw tubes, boxes, tanks, everything you can think
Yeah.
of. For any of you listeners who have ever been to Epcot Center in Orlando, and been through the greenhouse there at the Land, just like that, it was like 20, 50 different kinds of hydro gardens, and what Foothill Hydroponics did was gave you all of that you could just stand next to any day that you happen to have skateboarded over.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, and in the
but it's
San
incredible.
Fernando Valley, everything grows so well, outdoors, and yeah, he was,
Oh, you're really lucky like that.
yeah, yeah, that was,
That's funny. He was one of my customers.
yeah, he was,
I was a distributor, and he bought my stuff.
yep, yep, yeah, that guy,
Fans, filters, the whole thing.
yeah, he was,
He's still there.
they're
He's really old.
they're actually closed. I think they closed about.
Oh, did they? Oh,
I
that's
think they closed about a
oh,
year ago. I was driving through visiting stores in the valley,
COVID.
and they were finally shut down. I mean, that place was about the size of my bedroom, so compared to the warehouse style places, they just couldn't
Yeah,
couldn't compete on scale.
it was tight.
But
Yeah, it was tight. I would have done everything I could to preserve it because it's just like so many old Hollywood institutions. It'll close, it'll go away, and then everybody will miss it for what value it had.
yeah,
If it could have been anything, that would have been an ideal place, or one of several ideal places to have done like a museum of how it all happened, because it was a museum of how it all happened. Truly, if there was stuff they built 40 years ago, it's still there.
yeah, yeah, and he would have
I'll reach out.
pictures of things that he did for like Hollywood sets, like Star Trek and stuff
Star
like that.
Trek, Minority Report.
Yeah,
Yep,
yep,
they loved him for all that Philip K. Dick stuff. You know it. Yeah, was just awesome for that.
yeah. Very,
I
very cool. You said you got a good Kurt story. You probably have a bunch of good Kurt stories. And for people who aren't familiar, Kurt Reiger is the president of High Caliper Growing, which makes Smart Pot fabric planters. And Kurt is he's an amazing guy. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And you've known him for like 30 years. So do you have any good Kurt stories?
oh I do, and I won't embarrass him because he knows it's the absolute truth. Um, Kurt's another one of those people who really saw a future in a product um, that nobody else did necessarily, including most of the industry he worked in, which is really too bad. And it's tough. It took so much faith, and I give so much credit to his family and his wife, for sticking behind him and carrying it all forward. But I'll take all your listeners back to Kurt back in the '90s, really late '80s. Okay. Incidentally, to anybody who haven't met him, he's kind of a nerd, though we all are, right?
We're a
But
bit nerdy in this industry. Most of us who are a bit on the techie side.
That's it. That's it. And some of them, are really like their way nth degree, and he falls into that. And good on him because it's that all this fortune has turned back to him. The arc of justice is long. But here's me and Kurt. So I went to I was doing horticulture at the University of Florida. I was already doing tissue culture at this point in the laboratory over there, and had gone on and actually been hired from the college without asking necessarily by a large tissue culture company in Apopka near Orlando called AgriStarts. So they were just looking for someone to do the special project. Anyway, in the course of me learning and managing this division of the tissue culture company, we went to the big horticulture trade show, the floral foliage show called FNATS. I don't even remember what it stood for, down in Miami. So I go down there for FNATS, and we're walking this amazing trade show. And of course, I'm eating it up because here's big greenhouse, irrigation, lighting, so on like that from the hort industry. And my whole thing was always trying to take hort and put it in a bedroom.
Right.
So, that was my goal for 20 years. And sure enough, and here's high caliber growing. And he's got the big tree pots over there. And he's hanging out in the booth on his own. And it's just a 10 by 10 with the simplest little stuff. But the things that he has hanging on the wall when you go to the office were what was on the table. It was all about tires and petroleum product, because he was recycling. This stuff was all being made from, recycled petroleum products, that were safe for plants. And we started talking. I was like, oh my God. In the course of me going to school at UF, I had pretty much worked in every nursery. That's how I ended up at Lowe's. I'd worked in every retail nursery, and I had worked at the Gainesville Tree Farm, right? And we had put plants in these tree pots. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic because we had these big, gorgeous trees that you'd ordinarily have to wrap in burlap, or would have to dig out of the earth with a crazy giant spade and everything like that. But the smart pot plants were perfectly all self-contained with their own little irrigation on them. Truly exactly what they would become in cannabis. Did not see it. I cannot believe that it was right in front of me all this time. But I'm talking to Kurt, and I was like, oh, this is great. I use your pots. I work for Randy at the Gainesville Tree Farm. And he was like, oh, that's great. Yeah, we sell them all the time. And we were talking about trees and the whole thing like that. And, he's just happy as a clam because, here's somebody who uses the product. And I'm like 24, and I'm super enthusiastic about all of it. But of course, I didn't tell him anything about my side project growing cannabis. And he wasn't thinking anything but trees because he was still a big pot guy. And so anyway, that might have been the last time I ever saw Kurt, unless I went to another Fanats. And then probably, what was it, maybe 2006 or 7 or something like that, maybe 2008, was when Dustin Frazier called him up, out of Covelo, California, and was like, hey, I really like your pots. I want to buy more of them, because he was starting to create the whole cannabis tree technique using the pots. And of course, we saw where everything went after that. It was exactly what it's supposed to be. I mean, it was exactly what we did with trees. When I saw Dustin's trees and what he was doing with the pots, I just kicked myself because I was like, I can't freaking believe it that I had a 15-year head start, had all the background knowledge, and it just didn't occur to me. And of course, to just make the pot smaller, so that you could use them inside or for whatever purpose like that. Anyway, not only did I have the previous experience with the product and loved it from the 80s, but that, I just hadn't applied it to what we were doing inside and knew immediately when I saw it. I mean, it was a zero moment realization where it was like, that's it. And I forever changed afterwards, and I am the biggest Smart Pot fan and always will be.
Yeah,
I'm the biggest Kurt fan, and always will be also.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, Smart Pots. Well, I guess Smart Pots as a retail product is much newer than the tree bag, for the tree farming industry, certainly. But, even still, Smart Pots have been around for a long time, and so many growers, cannabis or traditional, tomatoes, peppers, have never heard of Smart Pots or fabric pots in general. So it's cool that we've been around for decades, but we still have many more minds to change. And to convert them over from their plastic and clay pots over to Smart Pots. So, Did Kurt recognize you when you saw him later on?
As soon as I mentioned Fanats Miami 1991, he just his face lit up. Yeah. Because when you're not busy like that, you don't have that many people to confuse. And besides, I mentioned the tree farm immediately. I said, I met you here. I was I was with AgriStarts, but had worked at the Gainesville Tree Farm, and he was like, there you go. Yeah. And we were immediately on, just like that. Yeah. It was hilarious.
The biggest Smart Pot fans definitely are people who have seen them in action, personally. You worked at a tree farm, you saw that they work, and otherwise people are maybe a little bit skeptical, how can a fabric pot be that much better? But until you see, I always say the proof is in the pudding, and smart pots grow a hell of a plant, that's for sure.
It really is. It's it's going to depend on the grower, the plant, and the medium and the watering system. Those all play together. But done well, and you've got lots of choices. But it's always saved me a ton of media, lifting, labor, storage, etc. Because it was immediately put it into place in all of my flowering areas, because you could give it the maximum amount of rooting space. Given a choice media, because it's all going to be, how much flow through do you want? What's your water retention? What is your nutrient retention? And versus oxygenation, and setting up something that kept it just right. And it's amazing how cannabis goes, because I often was really afraid of having, too much moisture on the garden, but that was not really the case. It was like, rebuild the media so it passes through, and you can almost have like a constant drip, and the plant will use it, as long as the salts aren't accumulating in any one zone or part or element, and also so that it's not wasteful of water and resources.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where your room determines it, because where you set your humidity and your temperature,
BPN,
vapor
is that
pressure
it?
density, VPD,
Or yeah, BPD.
VPD. Yeah, so the VPD, there you go. Your room has a VPD in the environment of the foliage, but it also has a VPD in the environment of the pot, which is where your product comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because your product is a transpiration
Yeah.
surface. You're going to breathe off water vapor. And so it's kind of interesting. You put all those things together, but it works in, and with more control, it is really amazing. I mean, as an industry, indoor growing in particular, the lettuce and herb houses that they're building with the robotics, particularly around New Jersey, I've seen, but now we have them in South San Francisco. That is really the future that I've been looking for all this time. It's going to be, we've got a variety of hydroponic systems, like we were discussing before. You can do a lot of things, but it's going to be what is particularly beneficial to the plant and the grow environment in that location, and that's going to be whatever allows more robotics. And in the case of those, the best gardens we have now, they are planted, managed, harvested, recleaned, replanted, all robotically.
Yeah, that's
They
amazing.
built it around what the robot can do the best.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's crazy, and it makes
Yes.
sense. That's going to be the way forward, because then you don't need as much space for humans to get up and down aisles. You could have those rows closer together, and just increasing efficiencies. And yeah, I've been hearing about robotic based like lettuce factories and stuff for, I don't know, at least a decade, but it kind of seems like finally the technology and the cost is starting to equal out to where that's what we're going to be seeing going forward. So
Yeah.
future's
Yeah.
here.
Take a lot of the miles off of that product.
Yeah.
And the transportation costs. And of course, that's what I always look at. That's always going to give you a picture of the future of cannabis. Will be something like that. The costs have to come down, and the costs are going down significantly. I mean, sometimes we move it to another country where labor is cheaper. Regulation is decreased. I do support regulation. In that it kind of tames the assholes, but it shouldn't, really hurt the small guys to get up. And usually the big assholes hide behind the small guys. So, that's their protective cover. But we want opportunities so that everybody can make good, healthy, sustainable livings.
Yeah. So I guess I'll kind of so to maybe put a little bow on this interview, how do you
Sure.
see the current state of cannabis in I guess especially California, but then going
Yeah.
forward?
Uh, what's great is, I mean, we're we're at a rocket's trajectory. Still, we've got more states coming on. The states are opening up. I mean, ultimately, across the nation, we still have more market to reach than there is product to supply them. Obviously, our barriers are today state borders. Um, uh, we have in the coming up are different federal regulations that'll be changing to ultimately be leading to state trade and international trade.
Yeah.
That's where I look at this as a bigger picture. It's coming. It's good news for some, bad news for others. Interesting enough because I know the lobbyists in Sacramento and also in D.C. is it is large cannabis companies who are lobbying against federal legalization because their money comes from keeping states locked up, in controlled
Yeah.
markets like that. And they've got large investments in those controlled
Yeah.
markets. Really, once you open it up to state, there'll be some changes in the market, and it's for everybody to be prepared. Look at New York, for instance. Uh, they, uh, they've just gotten into recreational, and that'll start to supply their market over there. But when it goes in, when we have interstate trade, how much of that will continue to come from Long Island and upstate New York, and those areas, as opposed to like Oklahoma, where you've got really cheap indoor gardening because they got cheap energy and land and labor, or California, where the species originate. So you'll have a lot of that. And I'm looking at the out of country trade because ultimately can't. I see cannabis following the model of wine in particular, um, because it's controlled beverage, adults only, but it can be boutique, or it can be trash. You can buy the cheap version or a nice version. It encourages tourism, and it has an inspiring history. Um, there's it. I see the future of the small grower, which is really always where my heart is. As a retail store owner and distributor and everything, I made a commitment. I made promises to thousands of growers that if they bought these equipment, took the risks that we're talking about, and especially the old guys, but even small new growers today, that there is going to be a reward there, a reward for their labor and their effort and their love, and that will be hopefully similar to small wine producers, in that you can grow something small, you can sell it online, that you'll create fans that will receive your cannabis every week or month or anything like that, and they can come visit the farm when they're in town.
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally, California has established a cannabis tourism industry. We just established a cannabis trail from Monterey all the way up to the state line, and a wine and weed industry that's about 4.5 years old. So we've started to combine these things so we can learn from each other because we have a lot of the same tourists.
Yep.
And incidentally, part of what I was doing in Colombia was tying together cannabis tourism to what we're doing in California, because they have the same thing. People going to the beaches of Colombia or the mountains of Medellin to go enjoy nature, ecotourism, and smoke products that were actually somewhat that the country is proud of. So today, Colombia is proud of the cannabis they produced in the past, not the stuff that made crime, but the stuff that was high quality and a product of grower
So
care,
do they still have like
and,
those
and, and,
old
and persistence.
landrace strains down there?
They're pulling them out. They're pulling them out. So the effort of like the last 10, 15 years or so have been to make sure that the best of the best is being preserved. And at the same time, there's the pressure to try to create products to the taste of the new market, who want the gelatos, Gorilla Glues, Runts, all the fruits, and so on like that. They are seeing the exact same thing that we see here. Cheeses from the UK, all the Spanish stuff, and trying to breed that in because, of course, they're equatorial. So their stuff wants to flower on day one.
Sure.
Their sun goes from 11 and a half hours to 12 and a half hours over the course of a year. So it's going to be supplemental lighting. They're doing greenhouses, mostly open, so the air can get through. They just need to keep the rain off of the flower, as the flowers are set. And so that's kind of a challenge too. Will be mold resistant strains, but big pictures are, just like wine and beer. You're going to have your Coors and Bushes and Millers, and Gallows and the big cheap shit. Most of the time when you buy pen products and so on like that, you're not really going to care for where it came from. And then there'll be big companies that fake it, and will sell you really good strains, but that they're producing in on massive scales using really kind of relatively rough equipment, as opposed to boutique growers. But there's also so much more market out there. So the other part about it is, how do we get cannabis to the people who don't yet consume it? And we did that with CBD, because we were able to increase the market to cannabis products with CBD products by several times, by exponential factors. And will those same people appreciate THC, and how? And that's one of the things we're learning from the tourists coming to the Bay Area in particular. And that is, they arrive, they want to do some cannabis tourism along with their wine tourism, or exclusively cannabis tourism. And there is an effort here to create a program, particularly among bud tenders, to get these, to kind of ease these guys into the experience. Because in the past, they've, for instance, given them, a 300 milligram bar of chocolate and sent them home, and like they weren't expecting to give this person bed spins right away. It's like, no, you can only eat half a square. No, individually wrapped, 5 and 10 milligram doses, and it'll be like ease into it, or the sticks have been really nice, a little smoke stick for the ones who are not afraid to smoke something, because you got people who are past smokers, or never smoked in their life and don't want to because they're 60 years old or older, but they do want to experience cannabis again, and so that it'll be to try to provide products to that market. Your parents, my parents, what gets cannabis to them besides me putting it in their brownies and sneaking it on them every so often.
Well, my dad my dad partakes, and I feel like my mom, she's pretty close. one of these days. I think the alcohol industry, beer, craft beer, I think, you've got your Miller Coors, but then you've got your local, regional breweries, and they're thriving and doing well, and I hope that's how cannabis ultimately ends up, and really everybody should be able to grow their own too. Not everybody's going to want to, or have the time, the space, or the expertise to do it, but as long as that, no one's going to jail for it, I'll be happy at that point.
Yeah. But that's it. Everybody should do what they love, and fits in their kind of natural environment, and try to steer their environment towards the natural. Use gravity. Don't work uphill, work downhill.
Yeah, work with nature, right?
And do for yourself, and enjoy it, and then it'll be like, oh, this is working extra well. Let's share this with others.
Yeah, I've heard a saying, like, you never get higher than on your own supply. Just like the satisfaction that comes with sampling. And really, that could go for tomatoes and peppers and anything you grow your own. It's always going to be better. It's better tasting, and then it gives you that, yay, I did it.
That's it. I mean, one of the things about growing is, any of those things, is that it should always lead you into more and more growing. For that exact reason, produce more and more of your own stuff. you're going to be producing plants. Eat plants. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we can do all of, we can do everything from them. I mean, that'll long term, long future arc, because this is what I do. I mean, we're doing today stuff that I was generally talking about and predicting in the 80s. You know, one of the really wild things is people who I'm not sure if I put it on the LinkedIn page, but it's on my Facebook. Is you can see me 1982. I'm sitting in front of my science fair project, and it is hydroponics versus soil and sunshine versus artificial light.
Nice.
15 years old.
Nice.
That was my science fair project, and it was because I knew that what we were doing then was not the future. That what I was doing in that research was going towards the future, and all this stuff is going that way.
Yeah.
Eat plants, live plants, wet your plants.
People either love or hate
and
this
that's really
shirt,
it.
and that's what we're all about. Is we just want to get people talking about plants, right?
And I should have worn one of mine. I'm usually the advertiser. Today it's Cutting Edge, who also was in Columbia, by the way. So it was pretty much me, John from Cutting Edge, Arjan from Strain Hunters was there. It just happened to be the 10-year anniversary of his tour through the Santa Marta Mountains, his epic adventure, which they recorded for Vice. A lot of people saw. And the other cool part about that was when he made that trip to Santa Marta, he was carrying tubes of special travel tissue culture that I had made for him, which actually ended up being the foundation of the tissue-ponics we were talking about. So I actually created it as a mobile kit for his collector, Franco, bless his
Right.
heart, to use in his wilderness collection efforts. And he did, somewhat successfully.
Nice.
But that was it. Necessity, mother invention. But I was like, I made these for you, delivered them to them. They took them to Columbia. There they were on the video. 10 years later, I'm in the same location with some of the same people. And we can see the stuff. You could see the bottles in his hand, but he never said anything about them. But I could. I was like, stop, because it was on YouTube.
Product
And I was
placement.
like, look, right there, you can see them. Yeah, yeah. And of course, then Arjan showed up a couple hours later and was like, oh, yeah, you gave me those, didn't you? And I was like, yeah. So it was really cool to see him and his efforts. And of course, for anybody who goes to Amsterdam, all the bulldogs got totally revamped over COVID. So when they were shut down, he went in there and he took all the unemployed staff and they rebuilt all the bulldogs. So he kept all of his employees working, doing remodels.
Oh, way cool.
So a shout out to Bulldog coffee shops in Rotterdam, Utrecht, Amsterdam, and The Hague.
Yeah, I've only been to his one shop over in Amsterdam, and that was 2007 was
On the
like
canal,
last
red
time.
light district.
Pardon?
Wow. Yeah. On the canal, red light district.
Yes.
I know where you
Yes. Well, it went in
were.
Amsterdam.
And you went there just for the coffee shop. You did not. Yeah, you didn't wander down any of those other alleys. You were a good guy. You were a good
Well,
boy.
look but don't touch is my motto.
That's it. It's like it's like an aquarium store, except the aquariums are all red, and it's not fish.
Just avoid the blue lights. That's what I was mainly
Yeah.
told over there. Um,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
guess on that note, I kind of feel like we
I'll
could
wrap it
chat
up.
forever, and I was just looking at the time, and we've been going for an hour and a half. I feel like we might have to break this up into two
Sorry about
episodes when we post it. But I
Or 6 and 10.
yeah, we'll definitely I feel like there's more stories to be told, more information to pass on, and that's what we're all about with the growing revolution. So Bill, on that note, I wanted to thank you for your time. I didn't want to take up your whole day, but you've been really gracious to share these stories with us, and I'm really appreciative of learning, more about the history of our industry that I personally love. I think the hydro industry, the lawn and garden industry is really the best industry to be in with all the best people. So on that note, thank you for your time, and thank you for being a pioneer in the industry.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Really, thank you for reaching out and pursuing me.